I find one of the most difficult aspects of writing is plotting, working out what's going to happen. But despite all those difficulties and wrangling with making the big skeleton of the book, all those things make my head ache. But I find what readers comment on and what they remember is often the characters. So I think it's because characters are what draw you into that story. I think characters very often are what makes you want to keep on reading. And I think probably most importantly, characters are often what makes you really care about the story. So I'm going to talk about characters a bit today. It is a big subject. So I'm just going to talk about a little aspect of introducing characters, and that's about how you first meet them. So I think that one of my tips when talking about any aspect of characterization is to try to think about your characters as if they are real people. And that's not because I'm going to try and advise you to try and write real people into your story. That's not what I'm going to suggest. But what I'm going to suggest is that thinking about real people can help you to think up characters. And I'm going to try and explain why, and also to try and help me explain. Today I'm going to give you a writing exercise. So it actually doesn't involve much writing, but I think it might just help you to understand some of the things I'm going to try and explain today. Writing's always difficult to explain. So think about people that you know, people that you interact with in your life, and then perhaps start focusing in, think about a friend, someone that you really like. How did you get to know that person? My guess is you got to know somebody that you think of as a friend, someone you really like. You probably got to know them quite slowly. I think we tend to get to know people slowly. There was probably a first impression. Do you remember the first time you met them? Was there something memorable about them? Do you remember what they look like? And I think then you get to know people. You observe their behaviour, you talk to them, and sometimes you watch how they react with other people. And eventually you get to know some of their hidden fears and some of their secrets. But that always comes later. So I think a similar approach is how I think about characters in a story. So, as I said, today I'm going to talk about introducing characters and thinking about characters at the start of any story. So specifically, the first time your reader's going to meet them. And here's where I'm going to give you your writing exercise. So take that person that you were thinking of before, take a friend, or it can be your dad, anyone you like, and you write down three things that you might say about them if you wanted to describe them to someone who'd never met them before. So it's got to be quite brief. That's why I'm suggesting 3 things. So I think that's a real challenge. I think writing 3 things is difficult. Can you sum up somebody in just 3 words? I think it's very hard to do, which is why I think it's good if you try it. Try and describe someone as briefly as possible, and then have a look at what you've written. And very often you'll find that it might be a mixture of things, maybe some about their appearance, something about their personality, but very often they're the things that you've chosen which are notable or distinctive about them. So if you've written about your best friend, you might say, oh, they're always smiling, they have long dark hair, they love chocolate and cycling. So that's how you might sum up somebody in that sort of way. You're trying to think of just a few things. And I think that ability to focus in on a few things actually also is worth a bit of practice, because it does get easier. So maybe try the exercise right away again, but this time try and do it for someone you don't know very well, where you're just going on first impressions. And then try it again for someone that you don't actually get on with very well. That's also another really good way to do this. And then you start to look at those things that you've written and the things that you've picked out. And you can start to see maybe how your friend might make it be different from your teacher or your boss or someone who's been a bit mean to you. And why have you picked those particular details? So maybe you've chosen them to point out the worst features of people that you don't like. And maybe you focused on the nice things about your friends. How much do you think people could tell about the person from that short description that you've written? Could they tell whether you like that person or not? Could you pick them out in a crowd? So basically what you've done is you've written something there which is called a character tag. And I know this is about a real person, but it's exactly the same. When you've got a limited number of ways to describe someone, you tend to focus in on what's often called a telling detail. So you've chosen particular things that either stand out or sum up a person. So I try to do this exact exercise for all my characters. I have a telling detail for even minor ones, and that's why I think it really helps to start thinking about characters in the same way as you do about people in real life. The first time you introduce a character in a story, think about what first impression they're going to give to the reader. Limit yourself to 3 things about a character's appearance or body language, and maybe 3 things about their personality. I've heard it called a character tag. I've also heard people refer to this sometimes as giving your characters a silly hat to wear. And it basically means that it's a way to help your readers tell your characters apart, even at the beginning of the story when they don't know them very well. I tend to think of it as being character shorthand. So a basic idea of a tag is that you're going to give all your characters pretty much a name. A name is a great character tag, and you're going to probably mention that character's name every time they appear in a scene. And the reason you do this is you help your reader to identify who it is in the story, who's in a scene or who's talking. And this is where character tags are really useful, is because you want your readers to be able to know who those characters are in each scene. And readers are never going to remember your characters from just a name. That's actually really hard for a reader to do. So try to find a silly hat, some telling detail about appearance or personality that you can bring in and tag to help your readers recognise, and then they're going to remember your characters. So find something that's easy to recognise, easy to mention, and also another tip is give a different hat to each character. It's going to make life much easier for your reader. And I think it's a bit like a person in real life. They can get to know them as the story progresses. You've got your words on the page, and if you're going to try and make your characters memorable, try to think really hard about those tags that you introduce right at the beginning. Think about maybe whether you want the reader to like them. Do you want them to be wary of them? The tags you choose can actually be really important. But however you do it, it's a good starting point, because by the end of your wonderful story, you want to have beautiful, well-rounded characters that are really real to your readers. But start off with that character shorthand, because I think by having a few broad brushstrokes that can easily define a character, it's also easier for me to keep a character in my head, and then hopefully it just helps you then to make sure that every time they are in a scene that they are very memorable.